Good morning from sacred space at Titania's realm. It's 11:45 a.m, so still barely morning on the 11th of March 2025. I thought I'd carry on with reading from Dream Fighter and Other Creation Tales. Actually, I wanted to attempt to go down to Carindale and try and source some food and some toilet paper, but my anxiety is through the roof at the moment. I woke up feeling okay, I had a good long sleep, so I don't know why that's decided to conflagrate. So I thought I've done some washing and hung it out, and I've pulled the sheets off my bed, which I really needed changing. They needed changing a week ago, but I had the cyclone and there was no way I was going to get anything dry, so I thought, meh. But so I've done that at least, and and now I'm just anxious as if something's going to happen, and it's weird because allegedly the cyclone's over, am I right? So I don't know what this anxiety is about. Sometimes I pick up other people's stuff too, which is not good because I have enough issues of my own. But anyway, I thought I'll weather this emotional storm by reading stories, and it'll take up a couple of hours of my time, and then I might mosey on down to the shop, see what's there, if anything, and just, navigate my way through the day as I do each day. So today we will be reading The Playmate. I want a playmate, said woman. Man stopped, turned and stared at her. Here he was, his food gathering bag on a stick over his shoulder, and his club to defend himself from the hoodlums among the animals, stuck in his belt, ready to tramp all day searching for tasty mushrooms and honey and edible snails, and all she wanted to do was play. A playmate, he echoed. Can't you weave another carpet? They're very pretty. I've woven 28. They're 7 deep on the floor. I'm sick of carpets. Then make a pot, suggested Man. You're a very good potter. I love your pots. I'm sick of pots, she cried. Then weave a basket. I've woven baskets till, look, my finger ends are raw. If you mention baskets again, I'll scream. She sat on the bed, looking miserable. Man's heart sank. What happened to the pet rat, he asked. He was good fun. He bit me, didn't he? She shouted. Be calm, said Man. He knew he'd have to do something. But what? Ask God, she said. Tell him if I don't get a playmate, I'm off. Off? Cried Man. Where to? Just off, she shrieked. Off, off, off. Flap, flap, flap. Like a bird. Go and get myself eaten by lions. Find some excitement. Anything. I'm withering inside. We could give her some excitement, couldn't we, people of Earth? Give her a cyclone to get through. That'll be exciting for her. Plenty of work cleaning up afterward too. Silly cow. This is what happens when you become a domesticated herd animal. Start taking things for granted. Do. Even I'm guilty of that too. She was growing more and more agitated. Man tried to calm her. "I'll ask him," he said. "Today. A playmate, you say?" He was just about to go when he turned back. "What kind?" he asked. "How am I to know?" she yelled. "It's God's job, thinking things up. All I've got is a snake. It sleeps the whole time. I'm perishing of boredom and snakes sleep." They do sleep a lot, I discovered, having Sybil come live with me. They come out, they lie in the sun for a while, and they go back and they coil up and they go back to sleep. She was the least troublesome flatmate I've ever had in my life. Not that I've had many flatmates, but you know what I mean. She was a delight and a pleasure. Man set off. His day was ruined. 'Twasn't always so easy getting a word with God. First of all, it wasn't so easy to find him. But today he was lucky. Man found God kneeling in a forest clearing. He seemed to be pressing his ear to the ground, but then man saw he had his right arm buried to the shoulder in some sort of hole. He strolled up. "Lost something?" he asked casually. God frowned, rolled his eyes, and twisted his mouth. He was obviously groping for something down there, deep in the earth. Then he gasped and straightened up. His hand came out of the hole, and God laughed. Don't you love it when God laughs? I do. Between his fingers, something struggled. "There we are," he said, and laid the creature on his palm. Took a few wriggly steps, then peered at man over the edge of God's forefinger. A tiny, froggy face with brilliant jewel eyes. "A newt," said God. "Funny. I simply had a feeling about it. I knew there was something down there, but I'd no idea. Well, well, well." "Is he your latest?" asked man. "Hard to say," God replied, peering into the newt's eyes. "He might have been here a while. Some things take an awful lot of work, but others, they just seem to turn up somehow, all ready-made. Very odd." "Maybe somebody else is making them too," suggested man, getting interested. But God turned angry eyes on him and stared at him. And so man said quickly, "Actually, I have a request for a special kind of creature." Now it was God's turn to be interested. "Really? A special creature, eh? How special?" "My wife needs a playmate," said man. "She says she wants some excitement." God's eyes became grave. He lowered the newt onto a lily leaf in a swampy pond. He pushed the lily leaf under the surface with one finger, and the newt floated off. Then, laying its arms and legs close to its sides, it wriggled away downwards into the gloom like a dove with ribbons. God sat back on his heels and gazed at man. "An exciting playmate for woman," he nodded thoughtfully. "Well," he said, "I already have one or two ideas. How soon? Tonight, maybe, said Man. Supper time about. Okay, said God. Tonight. And he stood up and strode away, his head bowed in thought. Man licked his lips nervously. He would have liked to say a little bit more. He would have liked to say something not too big, not too noisy, not too wild. But God had gone. Man began to gather frilly orange mushrooms, pausing now and again. But what he didn't want God to do was make another man. Too much rather stiff competition there. Come on, you know how you boys like to compete sexually over one woman. You all compete like silly little schoolboys in a yard sometimes. I've seen you do it, and it always makes me giggle. Because you're all unavailable anyway, the men in my circle, and I don't know why you do that. It's quite astonishing. No one's going to get the mummy because the mummy's waiting for her one, the one who's genuine and authentic and will love me till the day I die, till the day he dies, whichever comes first. Hopefully we live a long and prosperous and devoted and loving and sexually satisfying life together, but I'm old now, so I don't really hold much hope out for that, and I just sit back and laugh and laugh and laugh in the face of my own 60 years of misery and misfortune. Sometimes all you're left after the tragedy is the comedy. But watching my gentlemen friends compete, whether they're conscious or not conscious of it, can be a bit delightful at times. Ooh, and the jealousy. Some of them get jealous. I don't know why they get jealous since they're married and they're not available. But a few weeks back, I decided to, be inclusive and speak to a younger man who happens to share my grandfather's surname, my mother's biological grandfather. Wasn't actually, legally put down as her father, but he was actually her biological father. So I was intrigued by this, and I've known about this for quite some time. So I decided to have a chat to that younger man and ask him how he came by his name, since we are, have sat the same family name. And the look I got, if looks could wither, I would have died on the spot. Well, my handsome, talented friends, Mama T's allowed to talk to other men, and even be friendly with them and put my arm around them and smile into their face. Doesn't mean I'm going to take them home and give them a good rogering, although the thought is vaguely there, tucked away in my conscience, because it's time. It's time I kicked off my asexual celibacy and took a fabulous lover. But I was not looking at that young man that way at all. I was merely being friendly. You're in a club and you're dancing week in, week out, year in, year out, same faces you see for years and years and years. After a while, it sort of becomes appropriate to be a bit friendly. It's like we've sweated out our prayers and shared our pheromones with each other in a very confined environment for 14 fucking years, although I've only seen that young man for the last 2 years or so. It takes me a while to let people in, because of my complex trauma issues and the decades of very, very serious life-threatening abuse. It takes a lot for me to actually even be friendly to a man. So when I get cleared at for being friendly, it's delightful. I guess they're being protective, that personage. Very, very protective. A little bit too protective. But anyway, I've taken note of who gets jealous and goes to pieces the moment I have too much fun with another man. It's not healthy, my darling, especially since you're unavailable, to my great chagrin. So it makes me wonder if it's just some sort of a weird little game that gets played or whatever it is. But not my circus, not my monkeys. I go out for one reason only, that is to dance for my wild, magical, handsome, talented men and women. Don't forget Nessus and Ramjet the singer is a woman, and I support them all and we have a fabulous time. I actually wonder what some of them would do if I actually find a partner one day and take a lover. I hope they'll be happy for me. I really do. They did make some vague attempts to set me up with people, which I do not appreciate that. Do not ever attempt to set me up with anyone. I need to make my own choices, and when it comes to sex and sexuality. Anyway, I'm just musing. I'm musing about things. Goes nowhere, goes round and round in circles. Spinning a dime, round and round we go, same shit, different day. They all stay in their happy little love relationships with their wives and sweethearts, which is how it should be. And I stay sane and safe and free and wild, and occasionally I flirt with a nice man, or at least talk to a nice man. Can't always go through every weekend telling everyone equally to fuck off all of the time. Eventually, who's one to, be pleasant? How else will I find a partner? Makes me wonder if there's a level of sabotage that they don't actually want me to find a partner, because then I might go away and live happily ever after with someone else. Woo! Anyway, I'm just musing. None of those things are likely to happen. Not at the current moment in time frame anyway. We're all too busy recovering from the cyclone. Anyway, the man I love truly and deeply gets a little bit jealous. But when I get harassed by one of his floozies, as I do from time to time, I admit I get a little bit jealous too. And this is the weird thing. Neither of us have a right to be jealous of the other, since he goes home to his wife, and I know this, because he's actually a good and kind and decent man. And I go home alone to preserve my wildness and my freedom, because I too am a good and kind and decent woman. And no harm and no foul. But I hate those females that want to get right up my right nostril and act like they're better than me, or in competition with me. I compete with me. Even if my friend, whom I love deeply, was single, I'd compete with no female for a man. Sorry, I used to get lured into those little traps years ago with people who were psychopathic and awful, and it's just beneath my dignity. So, you want to fuck my friend, or God forbid if my friend wants to fuck you, be my guest, get a room, shut the door on it. I don't want to see your shit. It's the only thing I ask. Don't expose me to your evil and your rotten shit. You want to fuck someone, fuck them. But don't do it right up in my face. That's all I have to say about that. Have some fucking couth and dignity and coup de grace under fire. Anyway, this should tell you a lot about when I find someone fuckable, worthy, loving, authentic, sincere, genuine, and capable of being with me for the long haul. It won't be done in the public view, making a goddamn fool of myself, like some of those females do. Oh, you have to laugh. Anyway, she says this, but then I don't know what I'll do if I fall passionately in love with someone. It hasn't happened for a long time. From what I remember, I did used to do this semi-erotic dance. That one time I had a passionate Italian paramour. Oh, that was fun. But again, I went home alone. No harm, no foul. It was just show business, darlings. When I'm with a real lover, it's handled discreetly and privately. Just going to get my hash browns for a moment. Right, that's the last of my fat food and supplies. I'll have to go and do some shopping, won't I? I'm dreading shopping. I always dread shopping, but I'm dreading it more than ever because I get very triggered when there's nothing in the shops. Anyway, so there's a lot of cumulus, you know. I wonder if there's another storm rolling through this evening. Could be why I'm anxious. Anyway, where was I going on about my non-existent love life anyway, which is ridiculous? Oh, how many years am I going to go on about that? Guess till the day I die, am I right? Oh, that's right. We segued it. He didn't want God to make another man, therefore sexual competition. Right. That evening, man and woman ate their supper in silence. As the sun set, the glow of the fire seemed to grow brighter. Man could feel himself becoming more and more anxious. How's that for synchronicity? Story accurately reflecting my mood state right now. Odd, isn't it? Odd. His wife wasn't angry, and he wasn't exactly sulking. If anything, she was just sad. Well, he said at last, your playmate's coming this evening. She looked up with round eyes, but said nothing. God didn't exactly say what sort, man went on. Only we can be sure it will do the trick. Woman blinked and gazed into the fire. Man thought she looked a little bit less unhappy, so he felt happier. He told her about the newt. All she said was, I hope it isn't going to be a newt. They sat on, waiting. Wolf began to howl. Bats began to snatch moths from the edges of the fire's little flames. But still no Playmate. Finally, they went to bed. Man couldn't sleep. Was God going to fail him? Or maybe the Playmate had already arrived and they hadn't noticed. Maybe it was a moth or a bat. These didn't seem like very good playmates. But then, thought man, God had some funny ideas. Not all were what you might call perfect. Indeed. Dear Goddess, the creatures in human form he co-created. Well, it's true. The sun rose full and shone into the room. Man closed his eyes and tried to force the morning to come. Maybe in the morning. But suddenly he knew his wife beside him had lifted her head off the pillow. He opened his eyes and listened. Something was coming through the forest towards the house, and not very quietly either. Branches cracked and broke. "Ooh," his wife whimpered. Man got out of bed. Some of the animals did not like him too much. His hand found his club in the dark. He waited, standing in the middle of the room as the crashing came closer. And now he heard celery stalks snapping in the garden, and a crunching, and a munching. Was it an elephant? The chomping noises came still closer. Now the thing was standing just outside the door, slurping and chewing and breathing hard. Very gently, man pulled the door tightly closed and slid the big wooden bar bolt into its sockets. At the same moment, something pounded excuse me, on the door. The whole house shook slightly, and a mouse screamed. "Who's there?" shouted man. Dead silence answered him. Then the breathing started again, with gasps and grunts as the door creaked. Something was trying to force a lever or maybe tusks into the edge of the door. Man swung his club and slammed that spot with all his strength. A screech of pain went up and a heavy creature thudded away. More screeches followed, then whinings, and finally silence. Man and woman waited, hardly daring to breathe, straining their ears. Suddenly, a dark shape appeared at the window and woman screamed. A huge bulk blocked the moonlight. It was coming in. Again, with all his strength, man whirled his club and, after a few thuds and more screeches, the dark thing fell away from the window and the moon looked in as before. Man stood panting, waiting for the next attack. His wife crouched behind his knees, sobbing. Suddenly, to his amazement, the whole house began to rock. He had built it on low pillars, and now something seemed to have got under it and to be hoisting up one corner. A groaning series of gasps came from under the floor as the house reared higher. Man and woman crashed to the back wall, and the whole house toppled over. They struggled under a heap of pots and carpets and baskets. They were hardly clear when the house began to heave up again, and with another groaning gasp, toppled right over onto its roof. Now man and woman were lying on the ceiling, which had become the floor, and on top of them were all the pots, baskets, carpets, and the bed too. "Don't worry," shouted man. "I built this house to last." Jesus. But already it was toppling again and again and again, and the dreadful groaning gasps outside had become a sort of laugh, and the house was trundling over like a giant creaky crate, and man and woman and all their possessions were tumbling inside it like clothes inside a washing machine, and the terrible creature, whatever it was, kept on heaving it over like some sort of toy with horrible, grunty laughs. Inside, man and woman dived and rolled, bruised and dizzy, in a hail of broken crockery, in a great writhing tangle of carpets. There was nothing to cling on to. Man kept trying to push his wife out through the window, but she screamed and clung to him. "Don't throw me to that monster," she cried. So then he tried to climb out while he carried her. But each time, before he could get more than his leg over the sill, the house heaved up and crashed over, and there came another gibbering laugh from somewhere out in the dark, and they were both in a heap under their furniture. Sounds like some kind of tornado or cyclone, or perhaps an earthquake too. At the end of the garden, the ground sloped steeply to the river, and finally it happened. After toppling the house, to and fro and round and about, the powerful mystery beast rolled the house to the top of the sloping bank, and down it went. Crash! Crack! crash, crackety, splonge. I like that word, splonge. I'm always splonging in the shadowlands between life and death. Splonging. Sometimes I'm living wildly and triumphantly, and other times it's a kind of a slow and inexorable death. Splonging in the shadowlands, in limbo, in between the two extremes. Not so bad. How you going, Tanya? Splonging in the shadowlands, motherfuckers. Who loves you, Tanya? No thing and no one. Maybe everyone. It is what it is. Got to laugh in the face of all the madness people are there. The right person for me will come along one day. By then I'll be a skeleton or a corpse, and I'll cry by my bedside. Oh why did I make that fabulous woman wait so long? Now it's too late. Too late. But I shall not wither and die, drown in my own tears. There's beautiful, kind souls out in the world. They're out there. I meet them daily. Sometimes only on the internet, but they're out there. People with sense and sensibility and goodness and sweetness. Out there in your world, but not in mine. Not in mine, not today. I rather enjoyed those last 4 hash browns. The other ones I don't think I cooked for long enough, and they were a bit soggy and bland and just not happening in a far out way. But these ones were quite nice. I'm quite hungry. Go through phases where I have no appetite at all to ravenously hungry, and I'm drinking some mullein tea because my lungs are still a bit tickety-boo as well. Maybe that's what's driving the anxiety, that I'm still not well and I'm still pushing on. Wow. It is what it is, people of Earth. Water, excuse me. Water poured in through the window and the loosened joints, and man and woman heard the wild laugh rise to crazy shrieks. Their dark prison rocked gently and the water deepened. Man pulled his wife out through the window. They sat on the roof with a snake and a mouse. Their half-sunk house was floating in mid-river, revolving slowly. The sky over the forest was pink with dawn, and they could just make out, in the pinky grey light, a black, massive creature leaping up and down on their garden at the top of the slope, turning somersaults and shrieking, waving immense long arms. God rescued them and their house and brought them back home. He just couldn't understand it. I made him specially as an exciting playmate, he said. He only wanted to play. With our house, cried Man. He thought we were a squarish sort of ball. He bounced us about all night. Still, said God, he was only playing. He just wanted you to play. They found a gigantic, black, hairy ape asleep among the remains of the melon patch, worn out from his fierce all-night game. Woman gazed down at the creature in horror. It's only a gorilla, said God mildly. He's really very sweet. That thing a playmate for me, she gasped, and she cringed close to man. He put his arm round her as she began to sob again. You'll have to take it back, God, he said. It won't do. You can see it won't. So God sent Gorilla off into the forest and thought again. He asked Woman, what sort of playmate do you want? I thought you wanted excitement. She gazed dreamily down the river. They were sitting at the end of the garden, at the top of the slope. Man was away finding food. Like the sea, she said at last. The beautiful sea. The sea was a blue haze beyond the headlands of the mouth of the river. God gnawed his thumbnail. Like the sea, he pondered. How like the sea? Beautiful like the sea, she said. So, said God, a beautiful friend. I thought you wanted an exciting one. Beautiful, she said, and exciting. God gazed at her. She smiled at him, hazily. Right, he said. I'll have another go, but this time you help. He sat Woman on the dunes at the top of the beach and walked down towards the sea's edge. Now, he called, give me some sort of a hint. They both stared at the sea. And suddenly, there, she shouted, look, like that. Oh, lovely. A great green comber was heaving up a long, hollow wall of glassy green, full of lights and the ondine that stole my toe ring, no doubt, and weedy rags. It reared and reared, higher and steeper as it raced towards them. Its top burst into flower. The foam began to topple towards them, spilling down its face. Lovely! Shouted Woman, and her voice was lost in the whole colossal cliff of water. Sorry, as the whole colossal cliff of water collapsed, exploding in foam, and the beach shook. I needed that salt too. Really yummy indeed. Long arms of boiling milk froth shot up the sands and piled around God's ankles. He nodded. I think I've got it. And with those words, he ran at the sea, dived into the face of the next great coma, and disappeared. For a long time, woman waited, watching the breakers. The tide was coming in. The wind blew off the land, so the white bursting crests of the breakers flamed over their backs. Then she noticed a white commotion out at sea. She thought it must be a great fish fighting at the surface. Then she saw God sitting astride something silver and glistery, 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 glistery. He vanished in an eruption of foam, but he re-emerged much closer. He was racing towards the land. He was astride. I must see if Jared wants to come back with me to Stradbroke Island. Probably have to wait a few weeks because they got hammered by that cyclone, so they're still cleaning up and, rebuilding, I guess, from it all. But I want to go back there without my toe ring, because the Ondines, they're a cheeky little brats, very naughty indeed. Especially since I gave offerings recently at Jacob's Well to the Jacob's Well, I mean. Jacob's Hell. Well, they've gone through hell. They got hammered in the cyclone too. But anyway, I gave little offerings there to the water spirits there. And then the Ondine took my toe ring. I mean, like, can we say a bit greedy and entitled? More, more, more. They wanted more of me. More and more. How much more can they take? A lot more. Already taken it. Tribute. Anyway, what I'm saying is, I won't be wearing any jewellery in the sea at all this time. They could possibly take me, but I don't think so somehow. I've drowned too many times as a child. They, the water spirits, have had ample opportunity to just take me, not give me back, so there is that. He was racing towards the land. He was astride something, a racing bulge under the surface of the sea. And he rode up into the breakers, and as he rode up into the breakers, a huge shaggy head reared out of the water ahead of him. She saw its deep sea staring eyes. It reared a long neck draped with seaweed. She watched in horror. It was bigger than elephant. Then its shoulders heaved up, and as the great coma burst around it, it turned. She saw its long side like a giant white silver shark. For a moment it seemed to writhe and melt, as if it were itself exploding into foam. And the next thing, God was rolling up the beach, battered by foam. He got up and looked towards her, waved, then ran again into the sea, diving like a seal under the coma. Would you like to see what she saw coming out of the sea? A seahorse, no doubt sent by Poseidon himself. A real seahorse. Not those cute little squiggly things where the males give birth and, wow, Cute. This is my kind of horse. Although, to be fair, if I saw a horse like that coming out of the ocean, I'd probably run screaming and far, far away, never to be seen again. Where'd Tanya go? She saw an actual horse sit right beside him. So she naffed off quickly. She knows how to survive. I don't actually. I very rarely run away when I probably oughta. It's a bit weird how I hold my ground on certain issues and certain situations. Mama T holds her line. Fear. Face everything and rise. No good leaving your shoes in the desert sands, people of Earth. Sometimes you just have to just stand there and let it all pass you by. Anyway. Where were we? Right, he was diving like a seal under the next coma. Thank you, Marlene T, for driving the crap off my chest. It's already starting to bubble up. Lovely. So sexy. Who's going to love me now? No one and everyone. Do I look bothered? Not really. Anyway. Soon she saw it again, that struggling out at sea. And once more, God was riding towards the beach. He seemed to be riding in the crest of one of the towering combers of surf. But she saw he was having a problem. And again she saw the shaggy head lifted and an arching body with God astride it. In a smother and welter of foam, up-tossing spray, and amid the earth-shaking thunder of the breaking surf, this time God rode up the beach on the back of some animal. She saw it now, nothing like so big as a whale or a whale shark. It tried to turn and go back into the combers as the foam sucked back into the undertow. But God forced it to go on up the beach. It wheeled to left and to right, but he forced it ahead. And so it came, tossing its head and lifting its knees high as if it only wanted to go backward or maybe straight up into the air. Its whole body seemed to be tossing and quivering. It's a beautiful horse. Yes. I had a horse when I was a child, well, a teenager. God rode it up onto dry sand and right to the dunes. There he dismounted, and the beast stood, glistening, shivering and snorting. A dazzling smoke seemed to rise off it. God had tied a thick sinew of kelp weed stem round its nose, and that seemed to hold it. At any moment, woman expected to see it melt and spill, foaming away down the sand into the sea. Instead, it reared and surged and stamped. It was bursting with fierceness, as if a whole sea was somehow packed inside it. Glaring pulses of dazzle seemed to come out of it like flashes off the sea. Its skin quivered and rippled like the skin of a blown wave. Woman stared, dumbfounded, thrilled and frightened. "What is it?" she shouted over the sea's hoarse, constant roar. "It's gorgeous." "It's a she," said God, "not an it." And then he reached out, and before she knew what he was doing, he took hold of her long hair and sheared through it with his thumbnail, as if he were plucking a flower. Woman clasped her cropped head. Then she watched as God laid one hank of her hair over the creature's neck, and one great bunch of it he coiled round the creature's stumpy tail and let it trail and flow. At once the beast became quieter. It seemed to change. It looked at Woman, its ears pricked up, its nostrils opened wide. It stepped towards her and gently sniffed her face. She could feel the power waves coming off it so that her skin prickled. And suddenly Woman had the strangest feeling. Part of her was there, lifting in the wind on the creature's neck and tail, like its own banner, and she felt the beast was part of her. "She's me," she shouted excitedly. "I can feel she's me." It was a completely new feeling. It twisted in her, making her want to leap and run. "Up you get," said God, and he set her astride the strange animal. He slapped its rump. "Away home, horse," he shouted. It surged forward. It bounded over the dunes. She hung on to its neck. It knew the way. It ran as if it floated. Some of the sea's sound came with it. And so, as man set down his bag of mushrooms and nuts and sweet roots and snails and whelks and loganberries, he heard a drumming, and as he looked up, a great glare of light seemed to burst over him, and the strange silvery beast swirled to a stop in front of him, as if a flame had blazed up out of the earth, and now stood there, flaming, trembling, waiting for a command. To his amazement, his wife jumped down out of the dazzle. "What's this?" was all he could gasp. "Just what I wanted," she said. "My new playmate. God calls it horse." So it was, the playmate God had created for her, and so it still is. And man has learned, whenever Woman grows sad, that she is missing her horse. Indeed, there she is, riding bareback, wild and free. Right. The next story is called The Shawl of the Beauty of the World. God rubbed his eyes and yawned. His candle blinked. Out through the open doorway, in the dark blue sky, a star blinked. 'Twas late. Again he yawned. As he yawned, a thin squirt of juice from somewhere at the back of his throat sprayed over what he was making. Straight away, the creature's shape squirmed. He held it tight. "Now then," he said sternly, "you're not finished. Don't start living yet." But the thing squirmed again. The juice from the back of God's yawn had somehow brought it to life. It was a funny-looking object, just like a turkey all plucked and ready for the oven. Even its head was pink and bare, and it had no legs. God felt cross. If this thing had come to life, he really would have to finish it. Pardon me. He'd wanted to go to bed and finish it in the morning. Was it really alive? It had become still again. God shook it carefully. It lay still. He wondered if he dare leave it. He stood up, walked to the door of his bedroom, taking the candle. He stood there a while, watching the dark lump on the workbench. It lay still. So God went to bed and left the strange creature as it was, unfinished. Early next morning, God was awakened by a wild banging at his door. It was Elephant's wife. Elephant had fallen into a crevasse. God called his old mother up and sat her in a rocking chair to keep watch over his unfinished creature, still there on the bench. Then he took his ropes and started off to rescue Elephant. As the sun rose, man's two children, boy and girl, came peeping in through the door of God's workshop. They saw God's grizzle-haired old mother asleep in the chair. They saw the plucked turkey shape on the bench. They tiptoed in. Boy took the creature cautiously by the sharp beak. He lifted its head on its long, limp neck. "Wake up, Baldy," he said, and gave it a little shake. The creature opened its eye and blinked. Boy let go of the beak, stepped back, but the head didn't just drop on a limp neck onto the bench. Instead, it craned up, and now the head was looking at its own bare body and the stumps of its legs. It certainly was wide awake. "Oh," cried girl, "poor thing, oh you poor thing." The creature burst into sobs. At least, it would have burst into sobs if it had had a voice. It gaped its beak and gasped, but nothing came out. Only tears bulged from its eyes and dropped onto its own goose-pimpled chest. It felt terrible, and suddenly it wanted to shout terrible things. It wanted to shout, "Where are my legs?" and "Where are my feathers?" and "Why am I only half made?" and "Why me?" But no matter how much it stretched its mouth and strained its lungs, not a sound would come out. And now it wanted to yell, and no voice either, Where is my voice? It writhed and heaved and squirmed on the bench and rode at the air with its stumps. "Oh!" cried Girl, and began to cry, watching the poor thing's efforts. Then she looked round and saw 2 clawed feet bundled together, lying on the end of the bench. "These must be meant for you," she cried, and began to loosen the chain that was wound and knotted tightly round the ankles of the 2 scaly clawed feet. They did look a lot like birds' feet, but they were actually the feet of a demon. That was another story. And God had bound the feet in this fine but very strong chain, because though they no longer grew on the demon, they were still full of devilish tricks. And he'd laid them there in full view on the end of the bench so he could keep an eye on them. Now Girl stuck each foot in place on the poor thing's stumps, and with lightning devilish power they took root. They clenched and unclenched, and suddenly, with a heave, the creature rolled off the bench and, flailing its naked wing stumps, landed on its new feet on the floor with a thud. It took 3 steps, then put back its head, opened its beak, and nothing came out. "Find a voice for it," cried Girl. But Boy had already found a small bottle. He peered at the label and spelled out, "Voice of Voices." "Is this creature called Voices?" he asked. Girl snatched the bottle, opened it, opened the poor thing's beak and upended the bottle. A brilliant, heavy, green vapour poured down the poor thing's throat. It blinked. It felt, all at once, that it no longer existed. It closed its eyes and saw all the stars. But all the stars, in a funny way, were inside itself. All space was inside itself. Then it opened its eyes and saw Girl again, gazing with her large brown eyes, and Boy behind her, and the old woman crumpled in the rocking chair, and out through the door it saw the red rising sun. Then the poor thing's beak opened and out came the most tremendous yell. "Wow!" God's mother jumped straight out of the chair onto the bench. Boy's hair stood on end. Girl fainted. And where Poor Thing had stood was nothing. Poor Thing had vanished, and at that moment the room went dark. God's figure blocked the doorway. He was panting. "What did I hear?" he bellowed. "What's happened?" What had happened was this. At that dreadful yell from the poor thing's new voice, the demon feet had been frightened out of their wits, and they had simply fled. And they had taken the poor thing with them, new voice and all. And as the feet scampered through the woods and through the swamps, whenever the poor thing tried to cry, "Oh, please stop," out came that dreadful yell again. "Wow!" And away the feet went, more terrified than ever. And as they went, out came that yell again and again. "Wow! Wow!" and "Wow!" "It's nearly got me," thought the feet. "Oh, oh, I'm done for. Oh." And they leaped into a thorn bush and the yell came again. Wow! And the feet leapt over a cliff, thinking, "'Twill never dare follow me." But straight away, right on top of them, the yell came, out of the beak that was fastened to the neck, that was fastened to the body, that was fastened to the legs and the demon feet. Wow! Then the feet ran into a black burrow, and straight away the yell came deafening in the blackness of the hole. Wow! And the feet thought, "Help! It's in here with me." And they shot out of that hole and ran till the poor thing collapsed exhausted on a sandy plain. All the creatures gathered around it and began to laugh. Poor thing didn't dare utter a sound for fear his demon feet would start running again. But all on their own the feet began to caper about. They began to dance. They leapt and twirled, and of course, since they were growing on the end of poor thing's legs, the poor thing leapt and twirled, whether it liked it or not. Stark naked, flapping its foolish naked wing stumps, it leapt and twirled. The animals laughed harder than ever, and the demon feet were just thinking, "Why are these creatures laughing? Don't they appreciate a demon dance? I'll kick sand in their eyes if they don't stop laughing." But at that moment the poor thing couldn't stand any more, and it shouted, "I can't help it." But all that came out was a dreadful "Wow!" In a cloud of dust, a scatter of pebbles, the animals fled. And the feet stood. This time they didn't flee. It had suddenly dawned on them where the voice came from, and now they wanted to laugh. Yes, the feet laughed and said, "Wow, wow, wow," yelled the poor thing, though actually that was the demon feet laughing. Wow, 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 meow. Oh, no, I threw meow in. That wasn't that. That's me. Wow, wow, wow. Wah, wah, wee, wah is nice. Meow. Well, I like cats. My cousin Megan suggested that as a witch, it behooves me to get another cat. I should not be without a cat. It keeps all the demons at bay and keeps me safe. She's quite right about that. Except all my animals keep dying. I don't want to go through another pet death. It's too much. Then the feet set off after the fleeing animals. In no time they overtook the warthogs. "Wow!" they yelled, and the poor warthogs almost died with fright. They scattered, they jammed their heads down holes and under the roots of trees. Now the demon feet raced on and overtook the news. "Wow!" yelled the feet, and the poor thing just could not do a thing about it. When the feet ran and the feet yelled, the poor thing had to run and yell. And now the news tried to scatter, but they fell in heaps, their gangly long legs tied in knots, and the demon feet laughed madly at the top of their voice. Wow, wow, wow! The feet were enjoying themselves all right, and so they raced on, and wherever they found an animal, that animal saw this stark naked turkey creature hurtling towards it out of the distance, right up close, and then heard that ear-splitting "Wow!" Some animals went white with shock instantly. Some simply fell stunned. Some plunged into lakes. And what did the poor thing think about it? The poor thing was helpless in the power of the demon feet. The poor thing didn't know what to do. The poor thing simply rolled its eyes as the feet rushed it towards yet another poor animal, and as it felt its beak being forced open from the inside and the terrible voice getting ready to blast out, it thought, "Oh no, not again, not again." But it couldn't stop it, and out it would come. Wow! And the poor animal had to hear it, and it might be only a tiny shrew that actually died on the spot. Suddenly, a flurry of darkness in the air, and Crow landed just in front of the poor thing. God, said Crow, is looking for you. He wants to give you feathers. You do realize, I hope, that you are featherless, stark naked, and an embarrassment to the birds. The demon feet became still. They listened through the poor thing's ears. And the poor thing, too, of course, listened. Well, feathers would be very nice, it was thinking, and suddenly it felt excited. Perhaps they were pretty feathers. Some of the birds were gorgeous, though not crow. And so the poor thing cried, "Oh, please, yes, oh, please." But all that came out was a terrific wow! Crow closed his eyes, as a cat does when you blow in its face, and gripped the earth with his feet. "Okay," he said, "come to God at once." The demon feet needed no urging. In no time the poor thing arrived at God's workshop, but God was out in the hills, the coat of feathers draped over one arm, looking for it. God's mother saw it peering about. "There you are," she cried. "Oh, I am sorry. It was all my fault. Oh, I'll never forgive myself." The poor thing stared at this old lady, who stood wringing her hands and screwing up her face in the strangest way. It kept its beak tightly shut. "If only I'd stayed awake," she went on. "Man's little brats would never have given you the wrong feet and the wrong voice." The poor thing blinked, and the demon feet listened. What was this about wrong feet? They suddenly remembered the chain that had bound them so tightly. "And now it's too late," wailed God's mother. "I saw these spare, funny-looking feet, and I thought they were mistakes or leftovers. I threw them to the fox. He ate them, and they were your feet. Oh, oh!" She was actually weeping. The demon feet crimped slightly as they tried to smile. "And your voice," sobbed the old lady, "your charming voice. Oh, it was so pretty. My magpie stole it. He fed it to his baby magpies. Oh," that's what I told my children where their dummy went when they were very, very small, still sucking on their pacifiers. "Mother magpie stole it for your babies." They believed me too. Well, they were only babies themselves. For which it's one of the things they're scarred for life, and they've never quite forgiven me by it. It's one of their reasons for being estranged from me, that I told them sweet little lies about where their dummy went. Well, it was time to harden the fuck up, kids, and self-soothe without a dummy. I myself had a dummy till I was 5. I needed a lot of self-soothing being raised by maniacs, you understand. Maybe I should have let my kids keep their dummies till they were 5 and maybe they would have loved me. Not. Anyway, you have to laugh. God was so furious about the magpie stealing the voice. She mopped her eyes with the edge of her shawl. But I wanted to make amends, she said finally. I want to give you something. My younger daughter became estranged from the age of about 10 or so. Started hating me because I didn't give her an authentic doodle bear to scribble on. I bought a cheap one in the shop instead because we were desperately impoverished, but narcissists and 10-year-olds don't understand poverty, do they? Oh, that was the other thing. That was the other nail in my coffin for which I'm still paying. Didn't buy the authentic trademarked doodle bear. Now she earns $100,000 a year, can afford a busload of authentic doodle bears. I hope she's gotten over herself. One day she might, probably when I'm dead. Anyway, you kind of have to laugh, don't you? Mama T, the unloved mother, the unloved daughter, the unloved woman. It's enough to make you want to kill yourself, but I shan't. I shall outlive all my enemies for no other reason than just to prove some weird, fucked up cosmic point, and maybe I should smoke a joint as well. Sometimes you just have to look at the high strangeness of relationships with people and throw your head back and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh, lest you cry a river into being. Anyway, God's mother wanted to give poor things something to make amends. And now she laid in front of the poor thing the most astounding robe. It was blue, but inside the blue every other colour raced and glimmered. It was green, but inside the green every fiery colour flared and throbbed. Yes, Nostrebro Island is calling me, much in the way Byron used to always call me. Am I being called by Byron or by Nostrebrook? I don't know. But destiny is calling me. Babies. God made it for me, said the old lady. He called it the peacock, which means the shawl of the beauty of the world. He said, Mother, my most beautiful creation is for you, but now I want you to have it and wear it. Oh, please, please, please accept it. The poor thing couldn't believe its eyes or its ears. The demon feet were aghast with amazement and joy. Trembling, like somebody stepping carefully under a freezing waterfall, the poor thing put on the robe. Behind it, the long train swept, full of eyes like coloured moons racing through their changes. It lifted the train and spread it, and it was like a whole heaven full of big, darkly blazing planets spinning in their rings. God's mother clapped her hands with delight. Wow! Yelled the poor thing and the demon feet together. Then the demon feet leapt and danced a few steps. Then they and the poor thing together stamped and danced in a circle, shuddering. Call from New Zealand. Hello? Scammers. Scammers ringing all the way from New Zealand. Isn't that interesting? I'm getting a lot lately. Scammers. It's just unbelievable. Just quickly check my bank account. No, everything's safe. Scammers. Who the hell rings from New Zealand to try and scam you? That's a commitment. Quite a commitment. Anyway, where were we? You have to laugh. I actually, because it came from New Zealand, I actually thought it might be one of my friends calling me. Anyway, c'est la vie. I'm more disappointed about that than anything, actually. Never mind. Where were we? A tall, fine crown shuddered on the poor thing's head. Wow! It cried. Wow! Wow! And God's old mother stamped and danced with him and clapped her wrinkled old hands and yelled, wow, wow, wow. And God appeared, a short, rather dowdy brown, tasselled drape of feathers dropped from his hand. He looked amazed at what he saw. Then he began to laugh. He too clapped his hands. The peacock, he cried, and he laughed till his tears ran down, and he breathed to himself, wow. And thus concludes today's readings and weird segues and musings.